The most frustrating question in my mind is exactly how many people in Gatlin City are named Nova? What's up, guys? I'm your teen librarian, Gina, and in February you told me to read Renegades by Marissa Meyer, who I've been a fan of since before she was actually published. She wrote a lot of really great Sailor Moon fanfiction back in the day. The basic plot is superpowers became a thing, regular people were terrified and persecuted powered prodigies, bad guys were in charge for a while, superheroes became a thing and defeated said bad guys, and now we're 12 years later and the next generation of good guys and bad guys is stepping up to the plate. Our main characters are one each. Nova is the niece of the bad guy leader, Ace Anarchy, and Adrien is the adopted son of two of the good guy leaders, Captain Chromium and Dread Warden. This is their story. Well, the first book in their story. It's told through alternating viewpoints between Nova and Adrien, but it's not every other chapter. It's whoever it makes sense for us to get the information from, that's who we're getting the information from. So it feels more organic, but it's still pretty much 50-50 their story, so neither viewpoint is pointless. I also really enjoyed the fact that we aren't forced to sit through every little thing. Even if it's something that could have been interesting to see, if the full scene wasn't relevant to the plot, we didn't get it. Which I thought was an excellent idea for a book that was already 550 pages long. The two most obvious missing scenes are the trials at the beginning and the planning between Nova and Ingrid towards the end. We learn about the trials and about Leroy's idea for Nova to infiltrate the Renegades early on, but they're not actually that important in themselves. The important thing is that Adrien chose Nova for his team and she passed the trials with flying colors. We already know what her abilities are, and through conversation with her new team, we learn that everyone was impressed with her. And that's all we really need to know from what could have easily been a 50-page scene. We do get a little more about the entitlement that some of the Renegades feel by the trials being referenced later on. But again, 2 paragraphs of recap / setting the stage for future conflict versus 50 pages to show us 2 things? No brainer. The planning scene between Nova and Ingrid was also unnecessary and would have spoiled a lot of things about the climax of the book. A lot of the tension at the amusement park came not from what's going to happen, but from how is she going to pull this off? And that would have been spoiled if we'd seen that meeting. And I think Marissa Meyer does very well with this. She knows the difference between what needs to be shown in her stories and what can be told or otherwise revealed after the fact. That is a very thin tightrope to walk, and she does it exceptionally well. Although I did need to check that my book wasn't missing pages when I started chapter 39. Heroes and villains are difficult to differentiate in this story. In the general balance of purposefully causing pain, fear, and destruction versus helping, soothing, and working toward the common good, the Renegades certainly come across as the good guys. But there's a lot of nuance and gray in this story. Meyer keeps things deliberately murky. So I'm not going to talk about heroes and villains. I'm going to talk about characters. I think one of the most interesting things about the main characters was the exploration of nature versus nurture. And I'm not comparing Nova and Adrien to each other in this. I'm comparing each of them to the prior generation, to the ideals that they're claiming to represent. Nova is an anarchist, but a lot of the book is her debating internally, possibly subconsciously, whether she might actually be more renegade. Adrien, on the other hand, thinks of himself as renegade through and through. In both cases, while they're consciously 100% on the side they claim they're on, subconsciously, they may be more opposite. Nova wants the world to be structured. She wants people to stand on their own feet. She wants to believe in the good in people, but actually believes they're inherently lazy. True anarchy, as the word is defined in dictionaries, is the absence of law or any sort of recognition of societal hierarchy or government. It's the Wild Wild West on steroids. There's no structured punishment for crime or programs to help those in need. And that's not really what Nova seems to want. Now, whether or not this is what Ace Anarchy was aiming for is a whole other story that we don't know enough to judge. But for Nova, she doesn't want people to be kept down. She wants to see all people striving for more and suggests to Adrian and the members of their team that there should be a task force or multiple task forces of non-prodigies to take care of issues in the city that don't require superpowers, which would help build the community as a whole and give non-prodigies a stake in its success. Adrian, in his own thoughts, doesn't see why, as prodigies and superheroes, the renegades can't just go in and handle any possible situations involving people they think might be bad without any sort of evidence of wrongdoing. Which is actually a lot closer to anarchy than it is to lawfulness. Because people need to be able to rely on those in power to respect them as well as protect them. Adrian has this mentality of, we're the good guys, so we're right, and whatever we say or do is the right thing, regardless of anyone else's point of view. Okay, that might be closer to a dictatorship than anarchy, but only until someone equally powerful with an opposing ideology challenges them. Like, say, the anarchists. It's also an exploration of privilege and potentially a warning about failing to consider other perspectives. In the case of privilege, Nova grew up surrounded by people considered to be villains. While no one knew she was there, she didn't have the freedom or the security to grow up in the light. Adrian grew up very sheltered, which really prevents him from looking at things from another perspective. It doesn't seem to occur to him that other people who have other experiences could also be right. That the world isn't black and white, and gray areas actually do exist. Which brings me to another thing that I found really interesting, and that's the fact that we see Nova questioning her own beliefs and identity, but not Adrian. The obvious reason for this is that she's the one infiltrating the other side. Adrian has no reason to try to blend in with the anarchists, and therefore never sees them in an environment where they're not his enemies. There's also the fact that throughout the story, he never stops to consider anything beyond his own wants and desires. He creates the Sentinel and then doesn't tell anyone because he doesn't want to be told to stop. He shows up unannounced at Nova's house without considering whether or not she'd want him there and awkwardly stands around until she invites him in. He just seems very narrow-minded and self-centered. He's a good guy, a nice guy, but he doesn't think things through. I get the impression he's never really had to face any serious repercussions for his actions. On the one hand, we've got Captain Chromium and Dread Warden, and on the other, Ace Anarchy. I'm an optimistic person, and I love my superheroes. Given the fact that everything we know about these three is from the final days of the Age of Anarchy, and who they are now is seen through the eyes of their children, I don't know what I think of them. We saw Ace as an uncle helping out the family all the time, and from the story Nova told Adrian, we believe that he doesn't really want to rule. He wants the prodigies to not be oppressed anymore. But the more I think about things, the more I theorize, the more I'm like, okay, well, maybe he's a little more villainous than we thought. Nova sees the best in her uncle, and she's completely disillusioned with the good guys, so I don't think we get an accurate picture of who Ace Anarchy really is. The Captain and Warden, on the other hand, I don't think we can see as purely good. We see them primarily through Adrian's eyes, and even seeing them through Nova's, they seem like good people. But the only thing we really hear about hero-wise is the Battle of Gatlin, and we know they manipulated the truth of that. What we do see, peripherally, is what the Renegades are shaping society to be, which is very heavily reliant on them. We know that they're working on this agent or compound based on Max's powers, which Nova figures out fairly quickly is basically the Council working on a way to nullify the power of prodigies, essentially taking away a piece of who someone is. Prodigies have had their powers from childhood, some of them from infancy. Nova is right in her concern, especially with the wording the council uses. One of them basically says soon all prodigies will be renegades or their powers won't be tolerated at all. So yeah, it's a thing to be concerned about. I mean, it would basically be forcing every prodigy to follow ideals that they may or may not agree with if they want to preserve their own being. There's also the description of the amusement park. It was apparently rebuilt after the Age of Anarchy to once again be a place where people can go to relax and have fun. Quote, "Yet like so many of the council's ongoing projects, they had stopped when the property was just shy of complete, leaving enough details laying around that one could easily recall what it had been not all that long ago." End quote. What that says to me is that on a psychological level, the council is intending to constantly remind everyone, look, things are great now. You can enjoy this, you're safe. But keep in mind what came before, what we are preventing from happening again. Aren't you glad we're keeping you safe? It's reinforcing that reliance on the renegades. It's possible that they feel like this is how they can keep prodigies safe from the general population, but it's doing it by instilling fear of non-renegade prodigies and reinforcing the fear of prodigies in general. So this is both a theory and a question. Nova joins the renegades as Nova McClane, right? Then, when she's digging into the databases, she finds the file on her family's death and sees that the renegades knew there was a missing 5-year-old named Nova. They also knew that Ace Anarchy was closely related to the family. So either there are a ton of Novas around, enough so that nobody's suspicious of this girl that shows up with the same first name and age as Ace Anarchy's niece, or Captain Chromium at least knows who she is from the start and is pulling a Dumbledore, where they give her an opportunity to be good despite her past. Or the Renegade Council is made up of idiots. Okay, Ace. Meyer did an amazing job of keeping things secret there. I will admit I accidentally on purpose read the last line of the book when I was about 100 pages in, so I knew Ace Anarchy was going to be back. Honestly, my theory, basically until Nova went into quarantine and we figured out exactly what Max can do, was that Max was Ace and he'd been somehow de-aged. Obviously, I was wrong about that. For a while, I thought that Ace, Cap, and Warden were actually all former friends and possibly planned the Age of Anarchy to destabilize the normal people and make them indebted to the Renegades after the Battle of Gatlin. Still might be true. I think Adrian's mom was protecting Nova's family when she was killed. I don't know who did it. My theories range from Ace finding out his brother was giving intel to the Renegades and killing her so that she couldn't stop the rat mercenary, which would turn Nova against him eventually. It could also be that Adrian's dad was actually someone important, perhaps Ace, and the Renegades took her out because of divided loyalties. I was already predisposed to love this one purely based on the author, but add in WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Justice League Snyder Cut, putting me in a massive superhero mood, well, this played directly into my wheelhouse. And the fact that the writing is excellent didn't hurt. My favorite comic book characters are complex, with storylines that aren't just one side is completely right and the other is completely wrong. And Renegades delivers that. There's so much nuance to the story, and you can tell that the main characters are going to have a lot of tough decisions regarding their beliefs, their loyalty, and just who they are and who they decide they want to be. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. There are a lot of amazing superhero books out right now. For this rec, I decided to go with Powerless by Tara Lynn Childs. It follows the renegade theme of a teenager born into the world of superheroes. Kenna grew up surrounded by heroes, and even if she was one of the few born without powers, she knows the world is black and white, right and wrong, good and evil, heroes and villains. But when a villain saves her life during a break-in at the lab she works at, she'll find that there's an awful lot more gray in the world than she ever realized. If you're looking for a break from superheroes but want something with a similar feel, exploring two main characters with similar morality and goals but completely different outlooks on how to achieve them, check out Scythe by Neal Shusterman. The plot of Scythe is fairly different from Renegades, but the core issues remain the same. A society with a small group of powerful people in charge of making the tough choices, being corrupted from within due to differences in ideology, leaving it up to the next generation to fix what's broken. That is it for my review of Renegades by Marissa Meyer. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to vote for April's Tell Me What to Read between the 1st and the 15th of the month on the La Quinta Libraries blog. Join us on Discord for teen programs, activities, and events. And like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date with what's going on for you at your library.